Hey, Dr. Lamb.
Hey Stephanie, how are you?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
I'm good. Looks like you're driving home.
I am my nephew's first birthday, so I'm covered in icing and stuff. So I was just gonna let you know if I have my camera off, it's because I'm covered in icing and driving.
Well, be careful about the driving part. I don't care
Yes,
about
sir.
the icing. I get everything on me. Don't blame the kid. I know you did it. I just like that. That's what my wife said. Don't blame somebody else. I know you got that all over you. Yeah, well,
I do that too, though, so it could be me.
it could be. It definitely is always me.
That's
Hey.
funny.
Uh, Hello there.
Hello, Dr. Lamb.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm excited to be here. I'm gonna make sure my volume's all the way up.
Hey,
Hey, Jess.
Steph.
There comes Carl. Hey, Lordy. Me and Carl's gonna be the dynamic duo tonight. Uh, Carl, you still muted.
Let's go.
Let's go. Well, I guess I'm Markham tonight. Whoever that was that never showed up. I don't know. Was there a Markham in your group at one time?
Not in our group, but
I can't figure that one out. That's probably my mistake. That was James. But I've got it covered tonight. I was actually paying attention. I can't believe it either. Hey, Lordy. Again, thank you, Jessica and Carl, for participating in that group yesterday. I had two more today. I meant to call one of them and make sure that everything went okay. Um, Somebody asked me, did I coach y'all about what to say? I said I intentionally didn't tell them what to say. I prefer that they tell the truth. You know, you go to hell for lying, same as stealing or shooting somebody. So I'm not having anybody lie for me. Tell the truth on me. That's always the best policy. Hey, Lordy. Now, that's been an ordeal. I wasn't as involved as heavily with the writing this time as I was the time before. Thank goodness. Some of the more junior people got to do that this time. I did my time last time in 2017 and 18 when we went through it initially. Boy, it is a lot. I'll have to hats off to Dr. Porter, Dr. Van Cleve, Dr. Putnam. They were the I don't think any were they even there. Dr. Putnam was, but the junior members they were junior members last time and or they weren't there, and so this time around they got to do it this time around, and boy, it is a lot. It is a lot of writing, a lot of stuff. Hey Keith, hey Sandra, James
Hey,
is here.
Hey there.
Is it
hey,
7 o'clock?
everybody. Mhm.
I'm gonna wait another minute. And we're gonna get started. I got some housekeeping stuff tonight. I want to make sure I get to. Um, I was waiting specifically on Sean. When y'all turn your dissertation work in to a shell, my shell, anybody's shell other than when you get the report, do you get that little circle with your similarity number in it? Let me show you what I'm talking about. Let me share my screen. Let me see. Yeah. This one right here that tells you what your match is. Do y'all see that uh when y'all put something
Mhm.
in turn it in?
I've seen it, yeah.
All right. When you can y'all click on that and get the actual real report behind it?
Yes.
All right. As you can see on the face of it, that one was okay. It was 18, but what do you see when you click on the report further? What's this number right here? AI writing,
Mhm.
54%. Ouch. That's the number you got to be concerned about. We can work on this similarity number. This AI number is the one that scares me. Now, you have to understand the interpretation of that. Nobody is saying that you use ChatGPT to write your paper, but if you use Grammarly, if you kept Copilot on your version of Word, see like mine here, I'll pull up. Let me admit her. I'll pull up one of my Word documents. You'll notice that my Copilot is turned off right here so that it don't tell me what to write. You got to make sure you Copilot. That's the one that we're getting all these AI scores from lately. Is using Copilot, using Grammarly now. But you need to be able to click on that button and make sure that this is like this. Just like the one Sean turned in a few minutes ago. Hers says error. She's got a problem with hers. But that's nothing to do with her. But see right here, this is what we want. We want a similarity below 19, no flags, no AI writing. And it's real important that you make sure that if you can't get to that number, you let me know and I'll send you and you can link into my shell, or I've got a shell and I think I've got one in our class shell that you can put in there and we can get to that number, because that's the number that matters the most, is that AI score. Now, you've got to understand a little bit further. If you're at 19% AI, it won't show. It will not show at 19%. But as soon as you hit 20, it shows at 20. And so I get students that say, well, how could it went from 0 to 20 and all I did was add one page? Well, because you were already at 19.4. That's why. And so that's why we have to check it so often. Every time you turn something in, you ought to look at that AI score, because it accumulates and it don't tell you till you hit 20%. So make sure that you're not only monitoring similarity, that you're monitoring that AI score as well. You'll thank me down the road for that one, because you do not want, when you get, especially if you get to committee and you've got a full draft and you get a score like that and you have to go in and do major rewrites or cleans, that's not what you want to have to do. So make sure that you're keeping up with that. All right. So that's the first housekeeping item. Let's look at our weekly schedule. All right. We are now at Zoom class 5. We don't have class next week. Today is March 26th. Carl and I are presenting tonight. He's doing Essex. I'm doing Fowler. We meet again in 2 weeks, and then the week after that. So we have 2 more Thursday nights before our final session in Charlotte. And then we will have 1 class the last week, where I will cover that disciplinary data manual. Here's the good news. If I get that done to my satisfaction in class the final weekend, we can cancel that last week, because that's an extra week. And I'll turn you loose. But I'll let you know when we leave that weekend. I'll let you know if we're going to need to meet or not. Usually I don't. I usually am able to get to that manual and hit that thing pretty hard in that last weekend. And so we've already talked about it one time, but we're going to make sure that we hit that thing good. All right. Everybody knows where we are. We're here this week. We have a week off for Easter. Then we have 2 more classes, and then we have our final weekend, and we only have that last weekend if we need to. All right. Everybody understands where we are on the weekly schedule. Everybody understands on the presentation schedule. As I said, Carl and I are tonight. Next time we're together, be Keith and Latanya, and then James and Sandra are last. And then I always put myself last in case I get mine covered before we get there. So that's where we are in terms of our weekly schedule. Continuing on with our housekeeping, let me close that one. Let me close that one. And that one. That's my chapter. Please remember that you have 30 hours self-reported on your clinical log this semester. Make sure you remember to do that. And it's in here are the things that you can count your time for. There's a drop box in our shell for it, so make sure that you keep up and do your 30 hours. Only 30 hours, but make sure that you get that done this semester. That's a every semester requirement. So that's that piece. And then the last thing is make sure that you are doing your evidence work, which leads me on your policy analysis, which leads me to my stars of the week. All right, what does the stars of the week say? The stars of the week say that Carl and Jessica are the stars of the week on their evidence. They have already completed parts A and part B. Yay! And following close behind is Amy, Sean, Latanya, and Sandra, who have completed part A. So make sure that you're working on all 4 parts. Remember, once you get parts A and B done, it's on cruise control then. It's easy. About 15 pages on those, and then the last 2 parts together are only like 5 pages. They're just reflection. So once you get A and B done, you've knocked out 95% of the work. So get on that and make sure you get your evidence in this semester. So that's the stars of the week, Carl and Jessica, followed by Amy, Sean, Latanya, and Sandra. All right. On dissertation drafts, our stars of the week are Sean and Latanya. They've been putting their dissertation drafts in every week, making sure that they're going to be able to. They go to me, I'm checking them, and then they're going to their dissertation coach. So we're making sure that we're keeping up with that 1 hour dissertation class along with this one. I'm having more people fail that than they are the class. There's more work to do in there than I have. So keep up with that. And that's one of the ways that I monitor that. And then special shout out star of the week to Sandra, who is our star of the week on assignment. She's already completed her ethics scenarios 3 and 4 for the last weekend. So she's a month ahead. Look at her showing out. All right. So that's the stars of the week. Without further ado, I'm going to stop my camera. I'm going to turn it over to Carl. As I said, he has the first 2 chapters tonight, and I have the last 2. So, Carl, take us home.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Lamb. I am going to try to share my screen. Share. Here we go. Slideshow. All right. If you can see that, everyone give me a
We
thumbs
can.
up.
Excellent.
Okay, so diving right into this, want to say I am going to be brief, but want to kind of expound on just some of the things that I've learned through chapters 7 and 8. These are really huge chapters, but hopefully, as I try to explain this, we can all keep our house, as Dr. Lamb always says. I really enjoyed reading the Essex chapters as they have built off of each other. So this is really heavy. This was really heavy for me. I learned a lot. So hopefully what I have here will help you out. So chapter 7 and 8 is my chapters. Chapter 7 really dealt with privacy and liability involving student records. So I'm going to dive into FERPA and what that means, what a student records look like, how do you define student records. Chapter 8 actually gets into our freedoms as teachers, as administrators, constitutional and employment rights. Both of these chapters really emphasize legal balance in school leadership. It's something that we all need as we not just go for our doctorate, but like beyond being a supervisor of any kind. It is really important for us to understand the legal balance. Sorry, my dog is beside me and is having a spell. Cindy, you got to move. She's sitting with me on the couch. Um, as school leaders, this cohort, you guys are family, so we must really know our rights so that we can be protected and maintain order and professionalism. Starting with the end in mind, I thought that a great resource and one that you all can actually benefit from is on page 200. If you haven't looked at that, it really gives an administrative guide as to liability and student records. But I really feel like the bread and butter of all of the chapters is in the case studies and the questions that they present. So on page 200, if you really want to give yourself like a pre-assessment to see like how you would handle some of these situations, that would be a great place to actually start on page 200, even before reading the chapter. So do yourself a favor, look at page 200, look at those different case studies that they have to see like if you would actually make the right decision. So jumping right in. So looking at, got some notes here, looking at student record and liability. Student record and liability, we must first understand that students' records are legally protected. Um, and in the second bullet, understanding that mishandling these records may create a liability. And we have heard stories, Dr. Lamb has shared stories, we've heard stories in previous classes of how students' records have been mishandled and criminal charges are faced. People are facing the law. People are
Yeah.
losing, they're losing their house because they gave out information that they shouldn't have. So mishandling can be something as simple as a conversation in the hallway with the teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Dr. Lamb shared that story with us about and actually gave us that case of two teachers actually talking in the hallway. Confidentiality is both legal and ethical. It is our legal and ethical duty to make sure we understand how to handle confidentiality. Jess and I, we were in a interview with a counselor, and one of the questions was, "How do you handle confidentiality?" It's important that we really ask that question even nowadays. That our teachers know how to handle confidentiality because even if they are messing up or they're part of our team. So if they don't know how to handle confidentiality, then that gets us in a position where we probably don't want to be. All right. So looking at FERPA and student privacy, my notes at FERPA and student privacy. So FERPA stands for Family Education, Educational Rights and Privacy Acts. The main federal law governing student record and privacy. Um, in dealing with this, we got to understand how this applies to schools receiving federal funds. It is the law. So if you are receiving federal funds, you must know how to apply FERPA and use these students' records in the right way. It protects education records. It restricts disclosure of personal identifiable information without proper authorization. Okay, so there are rights that parents have under FERPA. And as we can see, they are to review and inspect student records. Parents have the right to request corrections of inaccurate or misleading information. They also can receive annual notice of rights, and they can file complaints with the U.S. Department of Education. Um, Full disclosure, we may be in a little bit of a pickle because of how some information was handled with a current kind of administrator. Um, but we think that everything is going to be okay just because there's rights that the parents have, but we are also protected in that way. I think it's very important to just kind of understand that while parents may file complaints with the U.S. department, they have that right. So parents do have that right that they can actually file. Students, eligible students, if a student is 18 or over, what I got from this, if a student was 18 or over, that they actually have rights. They can receive copies of their records, and they may challenge improper release of information. There was some things on page 193. There's a case on 193 where students were requesting and challenging the improper release of their information. So students do have rights as well. And the key there is eligible students. So when looking at school personnel, this one is very important. This one is very important. Understanding your school personnel and who has access to student records. Who is the person that is in charge of handling the sensitive information, and who is the person that you can actually talk to about that information. So access requires legitimate educational interest. Staff should not be able to access records casually. Something that I'm going to talk about a little bit later is how that the digitalization, digitalization has made it easy, but also made it very sticky in who has access to the information. So confidentiality still must be maintained. The rules still apply, even though it could be in file or if it's digitized. So like the law is the law, and it doesn't change just because we got MacBooks and computers. So it is very important to understand that. Rights of non-custodial parents is both hold on, let me see this real quick. Rights of non-custodial parents. Non-custodial parents may access records. They have rights that remain unless limited by the court of law or order. So schools must verify legal documents before denying access. So if they are not a legal guardian, or if they are not on the forms, they should not have access to the students' records. So you got to be real careful of that, because a lot of our students come with different situations and come from different backgrounds and family household dynamics. And that last point right there, assumptions can create legal mistakes. We see that a lot. We see that a lot. Front office lady makes a mistake, assuming that someone is a guardian or assuming that someone is a parent, and next thing you know, it creates legal mistakes for us all, and we do not want that. Student complaints. So student complaints with FERPA. This is interesting because whether student complaints are against teachers, they are protected by FERPA. Courts may decide that these records related more directly to the teacher rather than to the student. The text stated that Congress did not intend for FERPA to cover records directly related to teachers and only marginally related to students. So check out page 194 for that one. As I said, digitizing records. This was a way to improve access and efficiency. It was a way to increase privacy and security concerns, but schools must use safeguards and security controls. Confidentiality rules still apply in digital formats. Families should expect secure record keeping. Although there have been different hacks and different cybersecurity issues of late, the rules and the laws still apply. Students' privacy and physical exams. So this is where protections extend beyond just the cumulative files. It is federal law, also to cover surveys and marketing data collections. We have forms that our students have to fill out, whether we can take their picture, whether we can place them in a video, even for marketing purposes. If a child has signed, a child's parents have signed that they cannot be on our marketing videos or any of our photos. We cannot post them on any of our social media sites. So this gets really sticky, especially like if you're taking a picture of a group of people. We have been in one of those situations where Lincoln Charter does a great job in marketing, but we have had to take some things down because there were some parents who have signed different things where they did not want their child uh, on any of the social media sites. So that's a real sticky situation. But luckily, we have some parents that kind of really understand, but they could really press that issue if you ever caught with doing that. So schools must be careful when collecting sensitive information. So now when it gets to defamation, this was real interesting to me. I learned the difference between slander and libel. Slander is defamation of character that is actually written, and libel, uh, I mean, slander is when it's spoken, and libel is when it's written. I actually didn't know that until now. So there you go. There goes some new information. If somebody's slandering you, uh, that means that they're speaking, ill about you, about your reputation. And libel is when it is in written matters. And how this actually applies is like this is where school personnel has to be when they're communicating personal information and sensitive information. They have to make sure that they are doing it to authorized people, because if they're doing it to unauthorized people, they may face claims um, of defamation, and this can happen when it harms any part of your reputation or standing. So I know many of us probably have been in situations where either our character has been talked about or our work ethic has been mentioned to a boss, uh, and there's no clear evidence, but it's just bias. Uh, we need to understand that, like, how to protect ourselves, and somebody is breaking the law, and how to actually challenge that. So again, just going a little bit more in depth, slander, oral defamation, libel is written defamation. Confidential information should never be shared casually. Written records should be factual and specific. So one way to CYA, as we say, is to put it in the email. Put it in the email. If you need to address something specific, make sure it's in an email. Make sure that it's factual, so that you have it dated, you have it timestamped. This helps you as a professional be able to state what you have said, your focus, and your intention. So the last bullet there protects us all. Professionalism, 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 professionalism. Um, it protects students and it protects educators. Um, there's a lot of people who obviously don't understand the definition of professionalism, and they find themselves in a world of trouble. It takes just a couple seconds to find yourself in a world of trouble if you are not being a professional at all times, especially at this level. Because if you're at this level, there's always somebody talking about you, good, bad, or ugly. There's somebody always talking about you. So being able to handle yourself in a professional way.
All right. Can we stop right there for a minute, Carl, and then we'll pick back up. Can you go back to that original slide? I want to do a pop quiz on what you've covered so far.
Okay.
Go back to that original slide that you pulled out of the book. It's got something in there that we need to look at. But that one right there.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Safe and secure. Okay. All right. That's the one. If you'll go back. Okay. Okay. All right. All right. Number 5. That goes along with due process. We can't be putting teacher records into cumulative or permanent files. If there's anything about discipline, it must come from Power School or now Infinite Campus. It can't be handwritten notes, witness statements. None of that stuff can be in the cumulative folder. Now, I'll tell you a story on myself. A million years ago, I was a junior high principal in Charlotte, and we would have to send the records of the ninth graders over to the high school. And they were the old big Manila folders back in the day. And one of the things that the guidance counselors would be charged with doing would be going through those things and taking out all the inappropriate things that teachers had put in there over the years. Now that we do it digitally, the best way to avoid a swamp is don't get in it. Don't let teachers do that. The only thing that should be in there of a disciplinary nature is whatever you've printed out from Power School. That's the official record that was due processed. Kids can't defend themselves against teacher notes. So we now do it digitally. We used to do it physically, have to go through those cum folders. But you've got to make sure that teachers understand and the people that are in charge of the access that we only put official things in those cumulative folders. That's a biggie. That one is one of the biggest issues that we have is that we put things in kids' permanent records that are inappropriate, that violate their rights. They've not been due processed on. Remember, when a child is charged with discipline, part of the Power School process is the due process that goes along with it before that incident is entered in. There is no due process on a teacher note. Got to remember that. That's a biggie. That one happens every day, unfortunately to say. So that's a great one. All right, pop quiz. Does FERPA just apply to EC students?
All students.
All students.
All
I've had
students.
teachers just argue me down over, well, that's not an EC kid. I don't have to worry about that. Okay, that's your house, not mine. FERPA is not just for EC. People think that FERPA is a part of EC. It's not. FERPA is a standalone law for every child in your building, regardless of EC status or not. You got to remember that. All right, not just EC. Now, that emancipated child when they turn 18, usually they're seniors in high school by then, and the issue is releasing information from their files about college. They don't want their disciplinary records sent. That's a biggie in high school. When I was a high school principal, that's why we had to make sure there wasn't anything anecdotal in their file, and that the district had a process for expungement of files after a certain amount of time on disciplinary infractions. And you got to know that. So you can't be sending some kid's cumulative file to a college for them to make an acceptance decision when that information was was a teacher note illegal, or B, should have been expunged due to time. That's the 18-year-olds. That's high school seniors. Now, there's another group of 18 plus that you got to be concerned about. How long can an EC child stay in public school?
So they're 21.
Till their 22nd birthday. The whole year that they're 21. That causes problems because they're now 21. And 21-year-olds can have a unique set of issues that, for example, possession of a vape or a cigarettes. At 21, that's not a crime. Let me say that again. It still is. I mean, possession of alcohol until you're 21. But think about this now. You got 21-year-olds in your building. That's not a crime. What have you got to do to that record before you send it to a potential employer or a college? You got to expunge that because that's no longer a crime if they're 21. Again, you got to know what you can't be putting in those records, and you got to know what's got to come out at a certain point, but either to age or the age of the infraction. That the student, when they turn 18, they can request that if they haven't had any infractions in a certain amount of time, but that disciplinary record be expunged from their cumulative folder because it could be harmful to them getting a job or getting a college placement.
So, Dr. Lamb, so I'm glad you said that. That makes sense. So we have I have an OCS student, which he graduates this year, but his mom, which she used to be our principal, but they moved her to central office. She's going to let him stay at the school, even though he can graduate this year. He's going to still be there. Is that because he's not 21?
That is not 22.
22, yes. So he's going to
He gets to stay until his 22nd birthday. I don't care if it's in the middle of the year. They get to stay until their 22nd birthday.
So he's going to like walk across the stage in May, but then
but he still gets to stay until he's 22.
Okay.
I'm guessing she doesn't have care for him, and that's a way to get daycare for him.
Yeah, that's true.
That he gets to stay till he's 22. Yeah, wow. That's a great point, Lisa. I mean, you got to understand the rules here on these kids. That's exactly right. But make sure that you weed out any teacher referral stuff that didn't go through due process. Make sure it's out of those CUME folders. Make sure those CUME folders are secure. I know they're digital now. We used to take and pull them out and set them in cardboard boxes at the end of the year. Just anybody could walk into the guidance office and rifle through them. Can't do that kind of stuff. Now, on the boyfriend, fiance, girlfriend thing that Carl mentioned, boy, on picking up kids and getting on information, boy, that's a Rubik's Cube. Without the stickers, that one there is no answer to that question. It's case by case. I've lived too long. The world's too modern for me. I get that. I've been married to the same woman for 41 years. That's the only life I know. But I understand that's the exception, not the rule anymore. There may be various and sundry boyfriend, girlfriend, fiancés, exes, all of those kinds of things. Some of it you need a scorecard to keep up with who's who. I don't have any advice other than case by case, folks. Know who has non-custodial parent, people who are living in the home but aren't legally married. All those things you got to. I'm not telling you need to be in everybody's business, but you need to make sure that you're not releasing a child or a child's records with somebody that you're going to get in trouble over it. If they're living, if mom's living with a boyfriend and she wants him to be able to sit in on meetings or pick up that child, then you need a written notice from her about that. That's one of those. And again, I'm not telling you, and you to be in people's business, but you better protect yourself because next week when her and the boyfriend are on the outs, you're the one going to pay the price, for the falling out, that he had a wandering eye or whatever, or he was texting, the girls are doing whatever that men do nowadays. Generally, it's men that do those kinds of things, and not that it excludes. I don't want to be misogynistic, but you know what I'm talking about here. You better have a scorecard on everybody in your building and know who can and who can't, because when it changes, it was okay this week, but next week then they're suing you over it. That happens every day, every day. So you better know that. That boyfriend, girlfriend, fiance deal. Um, Videos. The cameras in your building. You got to be careful. The cameras on buses. You got to be careful about those cameras. The images, you can't use those in disciplinary incidents if other kids can be seen. You got to be really careful with that. Not only just media, as Carl pointed out, which is a good catch, but also in disciplinary. If you captured somebody else, you can't be using those. So you got to be really careful with those videos. That's a privacy issue. That's FERPA, either from the bus or from the building. Slander. That's why I tell people, quote me accurately. I did not say that he was a pinhead. I said he could wear a thimble for a hat. You know, the slander part, most of it now is going to be in social media, which is written. But again, you got to caution your teachers about making disparaging remarks about students or parents. I mean, I was in a meeting, one of the things you'd like to be able to say to a parent is your kid's an idiot and it's hereditary, but you can't do that. He got it from you. You can't say those kinds of things because people think, well, as long as I don't write it down, I'm okay. No, that, as Carl pointed out, the lawsuit in Lincoln County is over two teachers talking in the hallway. It's not over written communication. One was disparaging the kid. He happened to be an EC kid, so they double barreled that one. But one was disparaging or talking about the ability or lack thereof of a child in front of somebody else. Again, that would be slander. You got to be careful. It's not just written communication, it's also oral. You got to remind your folks of that. I told you I was in a building in Charlotte and I could hear teacher assistants in the lounge talking about kids. That's a no-no because I was sitting in the lobby. That would be a no-no. And then the last thing, I don't know. Again, I'm old. I'm out of touch. I thought that we had stopped doing physicals at school for athletes years ago, but I have found out that's no longer the case. Some people are still doing that. You need to quit that. I know it may be time in memoriam where you work or in the district that you're in, but I would not be doing physicals at the school site. I know that coaches want to do that. The health department and the doctors and nurses in the community are generally really good and helpful on that. The liability on that is just too great. Just too great.
So not on the school site, but you can still require that they bring in a physical. They
absolutely.
Okay.
But back in the 70s and 80s, folks, when I was a high school teacher, we used to the doctors and nurses would come over to the gym and we'd just line them up. I thought that was done, but I understand now that some places are bringing medical people into their campuses to do that. I would not do that. That's kind of, since COVID, that's kind of made a reappearance because a lot of parents don't want their kids going to medical facilities now. And I get that too. But I would not accommodate them by holding physicals on my campus. That's one of the bad things from back in the way back. I told you things weren't always great in the way back like we think they were. That's one of the bad things from the way back.
What about the mobile health units that come?
I wouldn't have any of that on my campus.
Okay.
Now, they've got their HIPAA requirements and the people, I wouldn't worry about the people in the mobile unit, but what about kids lining up or a kid being seen going into the mobile unit? Their parents may have an issue with that. Has the parent approved for them to go to that mobile unit? Parents will pitch a fit on you now. What do you mean my kid went to the blood mobile? They may get AIDS from blood transfusion or from a needle, or they may give them a vaccine. I would not be involved with any of that in public school nowadays. It's just too risky. You know, I'm telling you the truth in terms of some of these more rural places. Oh no. I mean, they think that they think that the COVID shot kill people. And I wouldn't have any of that. It's the PR is just too bad. I wouldn't have any medical on my campus. None. I know I know it's a convenience, but the liability is way outweighs the convenience factor on that one. I would not have anything medical on my campus ever. It's just too high risk. How many times we used to set up the blood mobile used to come to Olympic High School and we set it up in the gym. Can I tell you how many times people would faint, fall out from that? And parents mad because they didn't know their kid was giving blood? No, 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 no. The
Dr.
liability is too
Lamb,
great.
Atrium Health, maybe last year started essentially school-based healthcare where like our nurse can call the Atrium Health person on call and they will come and essentially do a like send a nurse practitioner out to
Yeah,
see a student or staff member.
yeah, yeah.
Don't
Something
do
like
that.
yeah. That's because you have a specific. That's not a cattle call kind of thing.
Okay.
And I'm quite sure that that person has given consent or that parent has given consent for treatment.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a very controlled and one-on-one environment. When you run a blood mobile up to a school, you don't know what kids are going to go over there. That's the differentiation. That's a great point, Jessica. Thanks for bringing that up. If you've got a school nurse and you're doing things through your school nurse, that's fine. But I'm talking about the cattle call stuff, where you just line up kids, everybody for a physical, or you bring a blood mobile in and kids are just free to go to the blood mobile. That's too high risk. That's the point, is the cattle call part of it. You have no control. You don't know. Parents haven't consented. School nurse, that's fine. And they bring in the health department, that's great because they're going through all their HIPAA stuff. They're not about to do anything illegal. They got documents out the wazoo before they'll even look at you. But you have no control over what kid goes to the blood mobile or gets in line for a physical or a flu shot. You have no control over that. Um, I'll tell a bad story on myself recently. I went and got a flu shot recently. Um, But I made sure I went to the grocery store so they wouldn't have my medical records because I'm not supposed to get a flu shot. But I got one anyway. Um, I mean,
Now there's two kind of flu shots. There's one for people that are allergic to eggs and people who are not.
yeah.
So you got to be careful when you're doing them flu shots.
I'm not allergic to anything except hard work. But so that wasn't my exclusion. Wasn't the egg allergy. I understand that. When you're getting certain kinds of treatments, you're not supposed to get a flu shot. The kind of treatments that I get, and so, but I felt it was more important to get the flu shot. And so I went and got one.
What about the pneumonia shot?
Oh, I've had everything. My age, I walk out of the house, I get a shot. What are you talking about? I've had shingles, pneumonia, tetanus, every COVID known to man, every flu known to man. What are you talking about? I got the double shingle. I got the pneumonia shot for people over 65. I've got everything. But I had a health condition where I didn't need to get a flu shot for a certain period of time, but I felt like I was risking it coming to do the weekends in Charlotte. So right before the first weekend, I went and got a flu shot. I should have waited another 4 or 6 weeks, but I felt like the reward outweighed the risk. And so I just made sure that I went somewhere where they wouldn't have my medical records and got one. Sometimes kids do that kind of stuff too. Their parents don't want them to get a shot, so they go get one, or they give blood, or they do whatever, or they get a physical because their parents didn't want them to have one. I mean, that's the thing. It's gotta be in a controlled environment. And having the blood mobile come, lining them up in the gym, doing that kind of stuff, it's not a controlled environment. You have no control over that. You have no consent. You have no documentation. You have none of the HIPAA protections that nurses and medical people have. So I would take it under serious advisement before I started doing any kind of health care on a public school facility of any kind, other than through the school nurse and the HIPAA regulations that they're bound by. All right, excellent job, Carl. Let's moving on now.
Yeah, I only have a couple of slides left. One of them you already touched. So chapter 8 talks about academic freedoms. I think the important thing for us to understand academic freedoms is that classroom instruction should be appropriate to the assigned subject and should not become a platform for personal, political, or religious viewpoints. Again, let me say that. Like, in understanding that first bullet, academic freedom is limited to teachers, especially in K-12 schools. The classroom instruction should be appropriate for assignments, for assigned subjects, and should not be a platform for personal, political, or religious viewpoints. Not understanding that can get you in a lot of trouble. I mean, you guys can imagine all the things that are said on even on social media, which is the next slide that Dr. Lamb already kind of covered. But even when it comes to social media, when it comes to our politics, our personal views, how we believe religiously, like just make sure that our teachers are teaching our students according to their assignments or assigned subject matter and not their own personal beliefs. And even when it comes to teacher use of Facebook and social media, this was on page 209 through 212. Teachers may face disciplinary action for inappropriate images on messages on Facebook, TikTok, and any other social media. Like, I mean, we know countless stories of teachers who have lost their job, lost their careers, principals who have went on vacations and came back and did not have their house when they got back. So be careful, be aware of even things that you post on social media. And then the next one was dress, grooming, and privacy. Very important. This was on page 213. Like dress, grooming, and appearance may be regulated if a compelling educational interest or community standard supports the regulation. Teachers and administrators are entitled to privacy rights and cannot legally be penalized for private non-criminal acts. Non-criminal acts. All right. So know how to protect yourself with that. And religious protection with FMLA. Title VII prohibits religious discrimination. This was something that I got to learn a little bit about Title VII. I did not know that before, but glad I know it now. Schools must reasonably accommodate religion unless hardship. So do not assume. Do not assume. Make sure we ask questions to our teachers. Sometimes teachers are not just skipping out. It may be a religious practice. They may have reasons for being absent, but understand how they are protected. Accommodation may include leave for observances, FMLA, Family and Medical Leave Act. Leave must meet the legal qualifications. So as a charter school, that's one thing that I looked up to make sure that like we are in compliance with what the law says, because you got to know, you got to be aligned with the law. Just because you charter, private, or whatever type of institution, it must align with the law, and you must be doing it correctly. If you don't know it, you could face some serious trouble. And then my final takeaways right here: student privacy requires lawful record management. Make sure our people are taking care of student records and that they are authorized to do so. FERPA gives clear rights to parents and eligible students. Improper disclosure can lead to liability and defamation claims. Teacher retain freedoms, but those freedoms are not unlimited. Administrators must make balance and legal defensible decisions. And that's where I feel like we do our best, is when we make decisions that are fair and equitable and can be legally defended. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. That was great. On Carl's last section here, you can stop your share now. I have one question, and this is for the group. Let's say that you are a religious school and you have a particular denomination that your group follows. I'll use Gardner Webb as an example. Gardner Webb is Traditional Baptist College. Should you ask any, even though you're private, even though you have a religious affiliation that's stated, can you make hiring decisions based on somebody's religion? No. No, you can't. No, you can't. I've had people in privates and in charters argue that because of their philosophy, that would be an appropriate question. It's never an appropriate question. And, you know, I'm just telling you that can't be a part no matter where you are. Obviously, in public school, you can't do that. But privates and charters, you still can't do that there either. Even religious schools, you can't do that because of Title VII. That's a federal law. That's a federal protection that citizens have. So I got a query from the university attorney a couple of years ago about one of my former doctoral students who's a Muslim. And his question to me was, did I think that's why she wasn't hired at the university full time? And I said, well, you know, I'm not in on the hiring decision, but I would suspect that played a part in it. And so one of the things that our attorney did was went back and make sure to write that in the hiring process for the university that you can't do that. That people wanted to argue that because we're a Baptist institution, that doesn't allow you anything other than just make sure you ain't dancing and drinking. That's the only thing that Baptist, that's the only thing about Baptist, But no, you can't do that at any time. Now, I've heard people say, well, you can talk about faith. No, you shouldn't do that either. You should not do that either. But in summary, that I'm glad Carl brought this out there at the end. There's law behind all of this stuff. It's not just best practice. There's law and policy behind all of this stuff. And even just because you don't know it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And that's why I love what Carl said. I've been learning a lot. Carl said, I've been learning a lot. That's the whole idea here. That there's a lot to learn. And just because you've been doing business a particular way doesn't mean that it's legal. And that's not an excuse when you go to court that we've always done it this way. Ignorance of the law and policy is no excuse, and nobody can give you the right, or nobody can indemnify you, or nobody can approve you breaking the law, or nobody can give you the right to break the law. That's not an indemnification. Nobody can do that. This is a personal choice that you have to make, and that's kind of the final bullet on this. Is all this is your decision. Nobody can give you permission or indemnify you from breaking the law. That it comes down to personal responsibility at the end of the day. All right. Excellent job. All right, let me share my screen. I had 2 chapters tonight. Let me see if I did my homework. So this is chapter 7 and 8. Chapter 7 is looking at policies, policy instruments, and cost effectiveness. All right, so here's my outline. And I'll go through this quickly. It's pretty dry. Educational leaders must understand the tools used to achieve policy goals and evaluate those tools to produce desired incomes and outcomes efficiently, cost effectiveness. Understanding policy instruments. Policy instruments are the means governments use to influence behavior. They translate policy intent into actionable strategies. You have regulatory instruments, and that's what we're mostly interested in: laws, policies, mandates, testing requirements, those kinds of things. Funding allocations, data reporting, creation and instruction of agencies. Those are the things that we deal with. And there's laws and policies behind all of those. You got to know what they are and know the right ones. You choose your policy instrument based on what's most relevant. Cost effectiveness. What you're trying to do is you're trying to figure out whether the policy outcomes justify the financial investment, the costs and the outcomes, student achievement, equity. You're trying to figure that out. Every time you pass a law or a policy, mostly policy at our level, is it cost effective, or is it going to cost us a bunch of money to do that? And is what we spend worth it? The challenges in cost effectiveness, of course, are difficulty in measuring outcomes, long term versus short term, political and ethical considerations. You must understand which instruments are to be used, assess their practicality and impact, and advocate for efficient and equitable resource use. That's the whole idea: is feasibility and equitability is what we're talking about here. When you're passing policies, you're using a policy as an instrument for change. You've got to assess, can we measure the change that we're looking for, and how much change do we need to justify the cost? So that's when we're talking about policy instruments, but using policy as an instrument. That's the whole idea. Policy implementation, getting people to carry out a policy. That's actually implementing it, the process of translating policy into practice. What do we do to implement this policy? Occurs primarily at district, school, classroom levels. Key actors, obviously school administrators, teachers and staff, state and local agencies, external stakeholders. And that brings us to the notion that you can't pass a policy that conflicts with state or with state or federal law or state policy. I'm going to stop right there and talk about testing for a minute. South Carolina has quarterlies. And then at the end of the year, they have SC ready. They're in the course in the grade exam. Does North Carolina have state mandated quarterlies before the EOG or the EOC at the end of the year?
Are you asking?
Yeah.
Yes.
No.
No.
No. North Carolina does not state mandate quarterly testing. South Carolina does. North Carolina does not. North Carolina does not mandate quarterly testing to assess student achievement. The only state test we have is when? End
End
of
of
the
the
year.
year. End of the year.
End of the year.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I was thinking about the check-ins, but that does not count
No,
as
that's not a state mandated.
yeah, that's not state
quarterly
mandated.
test.
Yeah.
Nope. Nope.
Year
All right.
end of the course.
So at the end of the year, you have end of grade if your grades, 1 through 8. And in 9 through 12, you have end of course exams. What if a district wants to do quarterlies? Are they allowed to do that?
Yes.
Yes, they are.
Mhm.
You say, well, Dale, what's the point here? Who has to pay for them then?
They do.
The district does. That is correct. This is a perfect example of what we talked about in the first one. That's what I'm talking about. This we're talking about. You're using a policy as an instrument now to measure student growth, aren't you, if you're doing quarterlies?
Mhm.
Ooh.
So, Dr. Lamb, what about because we do teacher made exams at the
Well,
end.
yeah, but you got to pay for them too. You got the teacher's time and the effort to do those.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about. If you want to do quarterly exams, you got to pay for them yourself. You got to develop them yourself. And you've got to validate them yourself. How do you know that it measures what you want it to measure? The state goes through all that time and trouble and money to validate theirs. What about yours?
So the last semester, the teachers gave the teacher made exams. The students were able to take the teacher made exams from home during a certain time. But this time, my principal is making the students come in, so we have blocked off time for the students to come to the building.
You're taking class time, and we got to pay people during that time. Instruction's not happening. That goes back to the old: if you want to fatten a hog, you feed him. You don't weigh him all the time. And testing kids is not teaching. That's weighing. Takes time away from instruction, costs money, teacher time. You got to develop those tests. You got to do all that stuff. That's what we're talking about here. Policy as instrument. Policy as an instrument. All right, you pass a policy in your district, we're going to do quarterlies because the state doesn't support and pay for that. Doesn't give us time, doesn't give us money, doesn't give us the test. We can do it ourselves, but what do we have to do? We have to bear the fiscal and human resource burden of doing that. That's what you got to know about policy. If you decide to do your own policies, look at us. We're an educational leader, all right? That's fine, but you got to pay for that.
So we have a exam exemption policy. So with the teacher made exam. So for instance, if a student has an A average and have no more than 4 absences, they don't have to take it. If they have a B average and have no more than 3 absences, they don't have to take it. And if they have a C average and have no more than 2 absences, they don't have to take the teacher made exam.
Right.
Which is our policy.
But I would question the efficacy of the exam to start with. What's it telling you? I mean, you're just doing that because you can. And
this is what our leadership team voted on.
Well, I mean, just because the opinion of 1,000 idiots is still the opinion of an idiot. I mean, just because a group got together and decided to do it, that doesn't speak to the efficacy of the decision, how good a decision it was. The question is when you're passing policy as instrument, is it cost effective? Are you getting in return what you put in or what you were supposed to? If it's a little importance that you're exempting kids all over the place, you'd have to question, is this the right policy to begin with?
Yeah.
But you've got to understand as a school leader, the big picture here, that policy is instrument. And if we pass a policy, we got to pay for it and we've got to implement it. We got to put it in place and do all the background and all the back work and pay the people and pay for the instruments or, all the cost that goes along with that policy. We get all these people who want to do policy because they want to stand on principle. Well, you can stand on principle as long as you come off your pocketbook because you're going to have to pay for that principle. That's the notion here of chapter 7 into chapter 8 is policy as instrument. Instruments have cost. Instruments have cost. You're using that testing as an instrument to try to measure student growth, but it's a policy that you passed that said you were going to do that. You got to make the connection of policy to instrument to cost. Let me say that again. This is, as Bishop Jakes would say, this is the good stuff. I don't know if I'll be giving you the good stuff. Policy to instrument to cost. You have to be able to show that line. It's linear, folks. Policies aren't without costs. Policy to instrument to cost. That's why you have to do the cost benefit analysis. Is the data that you're getting rich enough and descriptive enough that you can use it to affect practice in the classroom? Is it that good that you would spend that kind of money on it? Policy to instrument to practice to cost. Policy, implement, instrument to cost. Policies aren't free.
Dr. Lamb,
If you're passing policy at the local level, they are not free.
I think sometimes people skip that first part of policy and they go straight to instrument and cost because the instrument looks nice.
Yeah.
But then, like, I like what you said, and I didn't get what you said about what is it? A thousand.
The opinion of 1,000 idiots is still just the opinion of an idiot. That numbers does not has no impact on the efficacy of the argument.
That's so good. That is so good.
You've got to understand that a lot of people just because there's no safety in numbers. If you're wrong, you're wrong, whether everybody believes it or supports it or not. But we get together and we think we'll get a little group together and we can hide behind the group made this decision. No, bad decisions are bad decisions, regardless of the number of people that made them. And the biggest thing that you have to understand when you transition from the school level to the district level is policy, instruments, cost. We're going to pass a policy and do this. We're going to pass a policy and do that. All right. What instruments you're going to use, and you know that costs money. Is the benefit you're going to get outweigh the cost? And these people are already hired, but yeah, but we're still using them for this. We have to charge that off as a cost for implementing that. There's a time-space continuum. I told you, I remind my wife of 41 years quite often. I'm just one man. I'm going to be in one place at one time doing one thing. She really appreciates it when I remind her of that. But there's a lot of truth in that. If we've got people pulled out working on testing all the time, are they teaching? What are we paying them for? Again, we're weighing the hog. We're not feeding him. That's not a good thing. And so too many folks, when they make the transition to the central office, don't remember the first rule of school administration, which is just because you can doesn't mean you should. You get enamored with the end of your finger, you point it and stuff happens. And you start making all these policies, and the next thing you know, you got people pulled away from their core responsibility of teaching, and now they're testing, or they're prepping, or they're doing this or that, or they're, instead of working on their instruction in PLCs, they're designing tests. You're robbing Peter to pay Paul. You can't make them stay after work and do that stuff, so you pull them away from their duties. That's a cost. You go out and you have some group, you buy you a test. You got to pay for that. That's money. Policy, instrument, money. Cost. Policies cost money. Don't ever think that they don't. You must be aware of that. So your first inclination can't be, well, just, if something's not going like you want it in the school business, your first inclination is, we'll just pass a policy. That ought to be your last inclination, not your first. Not your first. That has other things associated with it. So that's the takeaway from chapter 7, is that policy is instrument, is cost. That you can't separate them. That it's all one thing. All right. Let's move on to Chapter 8, implementing those policies now. All right. We made the decision that we're going to pass us a policy now. We got to get our people to carry it out. That's going from translating policy to practice. All right. Here's the policy. What are we going to do in practice to make sure that we're following that policy? And here are all the people that are involved. It assumes compliance, which you cannot assume. You focus on the implementers, recognizes adaptation and local decision making. Are we going to implement with fidelity, or are we going to allow modification? That's got to be built in. A lot of times, I told you, we used to sort our stuff as principals in Charlotte by stuff that we had to do it now, do it this way. You got to do it, but you have some flexibility in how you do it. If you're looking for fidelity, if you're looking to do inter-rater reliability, if you're looking for comparison between schools, everybody's got to do it the same way. Otherwise, you can't compare it. At the micro level, at the school level, every teacher's got to do it the same way. What's the problem with RTI and MTSS? What's the problem with PBIS? All right, let's look at those three things. PBIS, Behavior Intervention System, Response to Intervention, and Multi-Tiered System of Support. Those are three big initiatives in public schools. Is there variation between teachers? You better shake your head up and down, because you know I'm telling you the truth. Therein lies your problem. Anything that you try to implement, any policy, those are three policies do they cost money? You doggone right they cost money. They're about to bankrupt some school systems. PBIS, RTI, and MTSS their policies, they're very expensive. They are instrument. And the problem is we can't seem to get them implemented with fidelity. I've got a dissertation right now. That's the problem, is they can't get MTSS implemented with fidelity. So you can't assume compliance. You can't, when you pass a policy, you can't assume that everybody's going to do it the right way. You'd be safer assuming that nobody's going to do it the right way. That'd be closer to the truth. Does that mean we shouldn't be passing policies? No. But what it means is we shouldn't be passing a half a dozen at one time and just telling people to go and do it like we do in the school business. We just, here, go do this. And nobody ever goes to check to see if they do it. Nobody gives us any support, professional development on how to do it. Nobody does any of that. We just tell people, we just assume compliance, that we can just send them to go do it and it'll get done. That's the biggest problem in the policy business right there. Beyond the cost and all the other things is we don't train our people, we don't support them, and we don't go and do the fidelity checks, the formative assessment to see if they're doing what they. And if they do, all we do is just basically grade them down. We don't go and support them to improve their practice. I mean, part of the deal, and when we're talking about formative assessment, is to improve practice, not just a punitive and an evaluative way. We want it done the right way. That means we got to do support. We got to do help. We got to find time to do that. We got to take time from something else. Again, time-space continuum. We can't have them in training while they're supposed to be in the room teaching kids. Policy is instrument, is cost, folks. You can't separate those. They're all one thing. And it's a fool's errand to think you can just tell people to go and do it and it'll get done. That is not how the world works, as we all know. You got to focus on your implementers, not just at the policy level. You got to go and work with them. And so, factors influencing implementation, clarity of the goals, resources, and funding. Right there at the top. Training and PD, right there. Leadership and organizational capacity, stakeholder buy-in, and local context, culture, needs, constraints. Implementation challenges, resistance to change, ambiguity in policy, insufficient resources, conflicting priorities. Again, conflicting priorities. Are we in your room to evaluate you or to support you? Conflicting priorities. Variability across schools and districts and from classroom to classroom. Policy adaptations. Policies are rarely implemented as written. Local actors modify policies based on context, belief, practical constraints, and money. Role of school leaders in implementation. You're to act as change agents and mediators. Your responsibilities include communicating the policy clearly, building staff capacity, that means professional development, putting your money where your mouth is, allocating resources in that school improvement plan to make sure that those things get done, monitoring the progress. That's the fidelity checks. That's the formative assessment, and that's not evaluation. You're not going to the room to evaluate them. You're going to help and support to improve practice, providing feedback to policymakers. Importance of feedback loops. You need to collect data, reflect, and communicate with the people. You need feedback, takeaways, and here's a little chart that we use. If you're thinking about a policy that you ought to do this a priori, we use this in all of our evidence work, and it works really well here. If you're thinking about a policy, you need to know what timeline you're looking for, what people are going to be responsible for the implementation, what resources you're going to need, fiscal and human, to do it, including professional development, formative assessment. How are we going to do it? When? Who's going to do it? When? On those formative and fidelity checks, summative. How are we going to measure if it worked or not? And at the end, what was our goal? What was the policy intended to improve to begin with? Those of you who are sitting administrators, one of the hardest things to find time to do is get into classrooms, and I'll speak for myself, is to find time to get into classrooms. And now you're going to have to get into classroom. And when you go, it's a business trip. You need to do a walkthrough. You need to do an evaluation. I mean, you're there for business. Now we're going to ask you to add to that load already another load where you're just going in to try to help improve practice. You're doing fidelity checks. Again, there's a time-space continuum. You can't only be in one place at one time doing one thing. Do you have the capacity to take on that much more load? So what administrators do during the implementation of anything, they tend to go in and evaluate because they have to be there. They have to do those. I'm belaboring this point for a reason. So here comes the big question. Can you expect people to follow your leadership? Can you expect programs, policies to get implemented if the only time you're ever in their room is in an evaluative sense? And the answer is no. That's the biggest change that school-based leaders have to make, is they've got to find the time to be in the room for a support function, a coaching function in policy implementation. And that's what I've told you. We just don't have the time to do that. It's very hard. It's very hard. And that's why people at the next level up need to be cognizant of that when you get to the next level up, that you don't get enamored with the end of your finger and start passing policies right and left. Policy is instrument, is cost, time and money. You're stretching already thin administrators to get into the classrooms more, not to evaluate, but to support. You're asking them now to take a more curriculum-based role in what they're doing. They don't have time to do. And that's why most policies fail. Right there. It's that piece. It's that fidelity check, formative assessment, that improving practice role that administrators can't or don't find the time for, that why the implementation of most policies at the school level fail. That's why MTSS is failing in a lot of places. So is RTI and so is PBIS for that very reason right there. Nothing wrong with the programs. Great programs. Nothing wrong with the people. Great people. But there's a time-space continuum. There's only so many hours in the day. You can only be in one place at one time. That's the issue with policy implementation, and that's the biggie right there. Review quickly. Chapter 7, you should learn. Policy is instrument, is cost. They can't be separated. They're all the same thing. Policies cost money, time, and resources. The reason why most implementation of most policies failed is that administrative supervision, that formative assessment fidelity check. We just don't have the time to do it. All right, that's chapter 7 and chapter 8. Carl did a great job. I didn't do too good, but I tried. I gave it,
No, I love yours. Are you sharing that outline? You sharing that outline with us, Dr.
Yes,
Lane?
I will put it under tonight's. I'll put it in under tonight's Zoom session. I certainly will.
Policy is instrument is cost. That was deep. That was good.
You got to understand that. And the main thing is when y'all get to the central office, remember that. Don't just be firing all policies at schools. Just you know what I'm talking about. You see it all the time. Thinking that that's going to change things. Policy can make change, but it's a lot harder and a lot more involved than we think it will be. We just write it and send it out, and people will do it. Nah, that's not how it works. That's got to be your takeaway. And when you write it and send it out, understand it has cost. It has cost. Time, money. All right, I'm going to go ahead while we're in the benediction here. I'm old Baptist. I can hear Just As I Am playing in the background. We're about done. We're calling for all the sinners to come forward now. All right. Is there anything I can help anybody with?
You didn't pass the plate first.
Yeah, I will when we're together again. Nah. When I was in graduate school at NC State, I was an undergraduate at NC State, and I went to graduate school there before I went to Chapel Hill. And I lived out on the east side of town, and we were poor as church mice. I mean, just poor. And the Calvary Baptist Church out on the east side of Raleigh, and we started going out there because that was closest, that's back when gas was like it is now, during the first oil crisis. And we went to a little Baptist church out there. And me and the fellows I lived with were all Baptists, and we went to church there. And first time we went, we carried $5. Now, $5 back then was a lot of money to us. I mean, we were having to live in an apartment in the ghetto on the east side of town, trying to get through graduate school. And the first time the plate came around, I put my $5 in. And again, $5 was a lot of money to me. And before that service was open, they had passed that plate 4 more times. And 4 times the plate came by. I didn't have anything to put. It wasn't like I didn't want to. That's all the money I had. And so, but I'm a fast learner. The next week, I went and got 5 ones. So every time the plate came by, I put $1. They didn't get the $5, and I felt a lot better about my salvation. So, but I won't pass the plate on you next week. But I know how that feels, though. I certainly do. All right, it's good to see you all tonight. I really enjoy being with you. Continue to make sure you get your internship hours, that log of 30 hours. Make sure you're continuing to work on your policy analysis evidence. Working on your dissertation on the side. You got all this time in the world to do all these things. Make sure, but the point of that is to keep up with that dissertation class that you got that's the companion to this one. Don't get me in a bind trying to get you out of that mess if you don't meet the requirements in that class. Them people, they got no sense of humor over on the curriculum side. You've noticed that about them, I think. I think that's. I'm checking my notes before we go tonight. I think we're good. We made it in a little under an hour and a half tonight. We did really good. I will see you again in 2 weeks after Easter. on Thursday. Thursday the 9th at 7:00. All right. Everybody's good. Everybody have a good night. I appreciate you.
Thank you,
Dr.
Dr.
Lamb.
Lamb.
Yep.
Dr. Lamb, I'll be on spring break starting next Thursday. So I'm gonna begin my policy analysis. I haven't started yet, but I've been focusing on like that quantitative.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That's more important. I
So
get that.
yeah, so that's why I have not started, but I will. I actually gotta finish my assignment that's due tonight, but I'll work on my policy analysis.
Yeah. Make sure that's got to come first. Make sure you get that stuff.
Okay. Thank you.
All
Good
right.
night.
Good night.